The love that leaves without killing something inside you may never have been real love, because true love is not that light and comfortable thing that people pretend to feel on social media. True love is a brutal force that breaks you in half and rebuilds you into something you no longer recognize. And when that love goes, when the person you loved disappears from your life, whether because they chose to leave, because life ripped you away from each other, or simply because time turned what was fire into cold ash, you are left there with the pieces of who you were trying to understand, why you're still breathing, why the world keeps spinning when everything inside you stopped at the exact moment that person said goodbye, and the first reaction, the most human and perhaps most honest reaction, is hate. Not that dramatic hate from movies where you scream and break things, but that silent hate that grows slowly like weeds inside your chest, that hate that whispers in the night, that you were an idiot for having loved, that you should have protected your heart, that the person who left you didn't deserve anything like you. It did, and that hate seems almost comfortable because at least it's something you can hold. At least it's an emotion that makes sense. At least the hate gives you the illusion that you still have some control over what you feel. But Simone Weil, a woman who lived only 34 years, but who looked at the nature of love with a courage most of us will never have, discovered something that goes against every self-preservation instinct you possess. She discovered that the truest love, the love that truly transforms you into something greater than you were, rather, it is exactly that love that teaches you to say goodbye without hating. And I know that sounds impossible when you are there in the midst of pain, when every cell in your body is screaming that it was unfair, that you didn't deserve it, that the person who left should pay in some way for the hole they left in your existence. But if you can stay with me here, if you have the courage to look directly at that open wound instead of trying to close it too quickly with anger or forced indifference, if you allow us to explore together what Simone Weil saw deep inside this unnameable pain, so something can change inside you, not the pain will disappear, not the absence will be filled, but maybe, just maybe, you can understand why some people come into your life not to stay, but to teach you to love in a way you never imagined possible. And if you feel like these words are touching something inside you that has been waiting to be recognized, something that hurts but also knows needs to be looked at, then subscribe to this channel now, because we're going to dive in together in truths about love and loss that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Because what Simone Weil discovered about the nature of true love will completely change the way you see not only this person who left, but the very human capacity to love without possessing, to feel without holding on, to say goodbye without destroying what was lived. Have you noticed how modern society teaches us that true love is the one that lasts forever? That if the love ended, then it wasn't real? That if you manage to let someone go, it's because you never really loved? And this lie, this cruel and comforting lie at the same time, imprisons us in a vicious cycle where we cling to dead relationships because letting go would mean admitting that we wasted time, that we were fools, that love wasn't what we thought it was. But Simone Weil lived in a time where everything around her was falling apart. The Second World War was devastating Europe. People she loved were dying, being deported, disappearing into the night, and she herself, with her fragile health and her constant headaches that had tortured her since she was a teenager, knew intimately what it was like to lose, what it was like to see something precious taken from you without warning, without preparation, without the possibility of saying goodbye properly. And it was exactly in this context of absolute loss that she began to develop a philosophy about love that most people would call crazy, impossible, cruel even. Because Weil said that true love is not the one that demands presence, that cannot survive the distance, that dies when the person leaves. True love, according to her, is the one that can consent to absence, that can love without the need for possession, that can look at the loved one and say with total sincerity, "I love you so much that I can let you go, and not because it doesn't hurt, not because it is easy, not because you have overcome or found someone better, but because true love, deep down, has never been about you. Never. It was about your needs being met, It was never about having someone complete you, because you are already complete. You just forgot about it along the way. And that person who left, that person who is now a hole in your life. They weren't your half. They were a mirror that showed you parts of yourself that you didn't know existed. And now that the mirror is gone, you feel lost because you've forgotten how to see yourself without it. But the brutal truth, the truth that Simone Weil had the courage to articulate, even though she knew it would sound impossible, is that her love for you, or your love for her, didn't disappear when she left. Love just changed shape. It stopped being something you can touch and hold and became something you carry inside, like a permanent mark on your soul. And that mark hurts. It hurts like nothing else in your life has ever hurt. But it is exactly this pain that proves that the love was real, that it transcended physical presence, that it became something greater than two bodies sharing space. Because love that needs constant presence is still egoic love. It is still love of necessity. It is still you using another person to fill a void that only you can fill it. But love that survives absence. Love that continues even when there is nothing left to gain. Love that allows you to look at the person who has left and feel gratitude along with the pain. This is the love that Simone Weil called impersonal love. And I know that word, impersonal, sounds cold. It sounds as if it is saying that you should stop feeling, that you should distance yourself emotionally. But it is not that. It is absolutely not that. Impersonal in Weil means love that is not contaminated by ego, love that does not require reciprocity, love that does not need return to validate its existence, love that is pure because it wants nothing more than to contemplate the loved one, even if only in memory, even if only in the painful absence that pulses with every beat of your heart. And here is the first great paradox that Simone Weil invites you to face, the paradox that will make your mind short-circuit if you really let it in. The more you truly love someone, the more you become able to let them go, not because love has diminished, but because love has purified itself of everything that was not love, purified itself of need disguised as affection, of fear disguised as affection, of dependence disguised as passion. And what remains when you strip away all these layers of ego is something so pure that it hurts to look directly, like looking at the sun, is a love that doesn't need you to exist, that doesn't need the loved one to be validated, that simply is, as light is, as truth is, regardless of who is looking or not looking. And Weil came to this understanding not through abstract theory, not sitting comfortably in a library writing about love from a safe and distant place. She came to it through lived experience, through real losses, through loves that hurt so much that she thought she would not survive, and she almost did not survive. Her life was a continuous series of goodbyes, of people she loved being ripped away from her or herself, having to leave because her conscience did not allow her to be comfortable while the world burned. She taught in secondary schools and loved her students with an intensity that scared the other teachers. Then she had to leave. She worked in factories side by side with workers and felt for the first time in her life what it was like to belong to a community of shared suffering. Then she had to leave. She went to Spain to fight in the war civil alongside the anarchists because she believed that some causes were too big to ignore. And there, in the midst of violence and chaos, she saw people she loved die. She saw ideals being betrayed. She saw the brutality that humans are capable of inflicting on each other when they believe they are doing good, and she had to leave again, carrying not only physical wounds from an accident that almost killed her when she stepped into boiling oil, but wounds in her soul that never completely healed. And in every departure, in every farewell, she practiced what she would come to call impersonal love. She loved without holding on. Without demanding that people or situations remain as she wanted them to be, she consented to reality as it was, not because she was strong enough not to feel pain, but because she developed a rare capacity to feel pain completely without letting the pain turn her into someone bitter, resentful, closed off from the world. And this capacity did not come naturally. It was forged in fire, cultivated through deliberate practice of attention, through hours and hours of looking. Straight into her own pain, without trying to escape, without trying to rationalize, without trying to make the pain mean something other than what it was. Just observing, just feeling, just allowing the pain to be what it was. And it was in this brutal process of simply being present with what hurts that she discovered something that seems impossible until you experience it for yourself. The more you accept the pain of loss, the more you stop fighting the absence. The more you allow the hole in your life to be a hole without trying to immediately fill it with anger, or another person or obsessive work, or any of the 1,000 ways we use to escape the void. The more that void transforms into something different, it doesn't disappear. It never completely disappears, but it turns into a sacred space where something new can be born, something you would never have discovered if you hadn't had the courage to inhabit the absence instead of running away. Her. But I need to be honest with you here, because Simone Weil was brutally honest about this, and I'm not going to do the disservice of sugarcoating what she said to make it more palatable. This process of learning to love without hate, of saying goodbye without resentment, of turning the pain of loss into something that expands you rather than diminishes you. This process is one of the hardest things a human being can choose to do. And choosing is the right word because no one can do it for you. No one can convince you to accept when every fiber of your being is screaming that it's unfair, that you shouldn't have to accept it, that the person who left should come back, or at least acknowledge the damage they did. And Weil doesn't ask you to forgive in the traditional Christian sense where you supposedly forget what happened and act as if nothing hurt. She asks you something much more radical. She asks you to look directly at the person who left, to see that person not as the villain in your story, not as the hero you lost, but as a complete and imperfect human being who did the best he could with the tools he could, that you had, that you are probably also suffering even if you don't show it. That you also carry wounds that you never saw because they never let you see. And when you can do that, when you can see the person who left as they really are instead of how their pain transformed them in your mind, something extraordinary happens. The hate begins to dissolve, not because you are being generous or noble, but because you finally understand that the hate was just love in disguise. It was love that you had not yet learned to exist without possession. It was love that you still believed that loving meant having. And now you are learning, painfully, brutally, that truly loving means exactly the opposite. It means being able to contemplate your loved one with total attention, with total presence, and still be able to say goodbye when goodbye is necessary. And Will called this capacity attention, and for her attention was not just a nice word. It was the most important thing a human being can develop, more important than intelligence, more important than talent, more important than any external achievement. Because true attention, in the sense in which she used the word, is the ability to be totally present with what is, without trying to change, without trying to escape, without trying to make reality different from what it is. And she said that attention is the purest form of generosity. It is the most precious gift you can give to someone. And she also said that attention is the rarest form of love, because most people, when they say they love, they are actually saying they need it. They are saying that the other person fulfills something in them. They are saying that the presence of the other person makes them feel better about themselves. But true attention is looking at the other person without wanting to. Nothing in return. It's seeing the other person as they really are without projecting your own needs and fears and desires onto them. And when you develop this capacity for attention, when you really learn to look at the person you love without trying to possess them or change them or make them be who you need them to be, then you can finally truly love them. And then, paradoxically, you can also let them go, because letting go is no longer a loss. It's just a change of form. It's love that continues, but without demanding presence. Love that persists. But without depending on reciprocity, love that exists simply because it exists. Like the sun shines, not because someone is looking, but because it is the nature of the sun to shine. And before we dive even deeper into this, Before we explore what really happens inside you when someone you love leaves and leaves only absence where there was once presence, I want to know from you. I want to know where you are watching me from now, from which part of the world you are seeking these words about love and loss. Leave in the comments your city, your country, because there is something deeply moving in knowing that right now, all around the planet, there are hearts like yours that are also bleeding, that are also trying to understand how to continue loving after death. Farewell. And perhaps Simone Weil, wherever she is now, would be smiling to know that her words about impersonal love continue to find those who realize. You really need to hear them, so tell me where you watch us from. And now let's go even deeper, because what comes next is where Simone Weil really challenges you, where she stops being philosophical and becomes absolutely visceral in describing what happens when you truly love someone and they leave. Weil had a concept she called malheur, which is generally translated as affliction or misfortune, but those English words don't fully capture what she meant, because malheur in Weil is not just deep sadness, it's not just clinical depression, it's not just the normal grief we all go through when we lose someone. Malheur is something much more specific and much more destructive. It's the kind of suffering that doesn't just hurt, but actively destroys who you are. That doesn't just make you cry, but makes you question whether you deserve to exist. It is suffering that combines physical pain, mental anguish, and some kind of social degradation or humiliation. It is the kind of suffering that makes you feel less than human, that makes you look in the mirror and no longer recognize who is looking back. And when you lose someone you really loved, when that person leaves, and leaves you with a hole so big that you can't imagine how you are going to go on living with them, you are not just sad, you are in malheur. You are experiencing the kind of suffering that Simone Weil knew could completely destroy you if you... She didn't learn to live with it in a very specific way, and she knew this not theoretically but experientially, because she herself went through malheur multiple times in her short and intense life. She went through malheur when she worked in factories and felt her body and mind being crushed by the brutal monotony of manual labor. When she, who had always been a brilliant intellectual, found herself reduced to a piece of machine without her own will. She went through malheur during her terrible migraines that left her prostrate for days, unable to think or write or do anything other than exist in pain. She experienced malheur when she had to flee Nazi-occupied France and leave behind everything she loved, knowing she might never see those places and people again. And she experienced malheur most of all when she understood that she would never completely fit in anywhere. Not in the Catholic Church she loved, but whose baptism she refused. Not in the Judaism of birth that identified her, but which she did not practice. Not among the workers with whom she fought, but whose life was not completely her own. Not even among the intellectuals who respected her, but did not understand why she insisted on sacrificing comfort for solidarity with those who suffer. And it is precisely because she knew malheur so intimately that her words about love and loss have weight. They have authority, they have truth, because she is not telling you how to overcome pain you have never felt. She is telling you how she herself learned to carry unbearable pain without being completely destroyed by it. And the first thing she tells you, the first brutal truth you need to accept, is that some pain never goes away completely. Some losses leave permanent marks. Some goodbyes change you in irreversible ways. And to pretend that it's not like that, to pretend that you're going to wake up one day and the pain will be magically gone, is setting yourself up to fail. Because you'll wake up and the pain will still be there. Maybe a little different, maybe a little softer, but still there. And if you spent all this time waiting for it to go away, you're going to feel betrayed. You're going to feel like you failed to get over something you should have gotten over. But Weil tells you, it's not about overcoming. It's never been about overcoming. It's about learning to live with it. It's about developing the ability to carry pain without letting it define you completely, without letting it become the only thing about you. And that ability to be someone who carries deep pain and yet is able to laugh, to work, to love other people, to see beauty in the world, that's not weakness or denial. That's the strongest thing you can do. It's choosing to continue living fully even when you're gone. Of you died with the person who left. And here is where the second layer of this descent begins. You need to understand what this specific person came to do in your life, because no one comes into your life by chance, especially not someone who marks you so deeply that their departure leaves you in pieces. And I'm not talking about destiny in the romantic or spiritual sense. I'm not saying that you were soulmates that the universe brought together. I'm saying something simpler and deeper. This person, with all his qualities and defects, with everything he gave you and everything he took from you, with the form-specific way she loved you and the specific way she left you. That person was a special mirror that showed you aspects of yourself that you couldn't see on your own. And now that it's gone, now that the mirror has broken, you're having to learn to see yourself without it. And it terrifies you because you're not sure if you exist without that reflection. You're not sure if you are someone without that person confirming that you are someone. And Simone Weil would say that this terror is precisely the beginning of awakening. Because while you needed that person to feel real, to feel valid, to feel worthy of existing, you never really were. Free, you were dependent. You were a slave to your own need disguised as love. But now, in the brutal absence, in the unbearable loneliness, you have the opportunity to discover whether you exist for yourself, whether you have intrinsic value regardless of who is or isn't by your side. And that discovery doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen in a moment of dramatic enlightenment. It happens little by little, in small moments over days and weeks and months. It happens when you wake up alone, and instead of immediately reaching for your phone to fill the void, it happens when you do something you always did together. And instead of being completely crushed by the memory, you can feel both the pain of the absence and the gratitude for having had that experience. It happens when you realize you are thinking about her, and there isn't that sharp pang in your chest. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood that she was a person separate from you, that her life is hers to live as she chooses, and that true love, the love that Weil spoke of, is capable of wanting the good of another, even when that good means being far from you, even when that good hurts you, like nothing else ever has. And then comes the third layer, the deepest, the one that Simone Weil explored most courageously, and that most people never reach because they give up first, get distracted first, anesthetize themselves first. You need to face the truth that maybe you never really knew this person. Maybe what you loved wasn't exactly who they were, but who you needed them to be. Maybe what you're mourning is not the real person who left, but the idealized version you built in your head. The projection of your unmet emotional needs since the childhood. The vessel into which you poured all your hopes of being loved in a way that made you feel complete. And that truth, when you finally face it without defending yourself against it, is absolutely devastating because it means you have lost it twice. First, you lost the real person when they left. And now you are losing the fantasized version when you finally admit to yourself that they never existed in the way you believed they did. And Weil would call this moment decreation, which is one of his most important and most misunderstood concepts. Decreation. Not it is destruction. It is not annihilation of the self. It is not becoming nothing. Decreation is the painful and necessary process of undoing the illusions you have built about yourself and others. It is letting go of the comfortable narratives you tell about who you are and who the people in your life were. It is allowing the manufactured ego, with all its defenses and justifications and stories about why things should be different than they are, to slowly dissolve, not because you want it to dissolve, but because you finally realized that he was keeping you trapped in a version of yourself that was never completely real. And when you decree, when you let go of those illusions, there's nothing left in the first moment. There's only emptiness. There's only the terrifying feeling of not knowing who you are anymore without that person, without that story, without that identity that you built around the relationship. But Weil says, and this is perhaps the most important thing she says about all of this, Weil says that emptiness is not the end. Emptiness is the beginning, because only when you are completely empty, only when you are no longer trying to fill the hole with anger or fantasy or someone else or whatever, Only then can something truly new come in. And she called that something grace. But you don't need to believe in God or anything spiritual to understand what she means. Because what she calls grace, you can call insight, clarity, transformation, growth. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that when you completely stop fighting the emptiness, when you accept the absence without trying to fill it, something changes. Not the pain disappears, but the quality of the pain changes. It stops being that sharp and desperate pain that makes you want to scream and becomes a softer pain. Deep. A pain that you can carry as long as you live. A pain that in some strange way connects you more deeply with life instead of separating you from it. Because now you know that loss is part of life. That love always involves the risk of pain. That opening your heart inevitably means that it will be broken eventually. And yet you choose to keep loving, not despite the pain, but including the pain. Because you finally understood that a life without pain would be a life without depth, would be a life where you never really touched another human being, where you never really felt, cared about something beyond yourself. And that's not life, it's just existence. And Simone Weil lived her short life with an intensity that most of us never achieve precisely because she refused the safety of non-pain. She refused to stay on the surface where it's safe. She dove straight into the depths where both suffering and meaning reside. And she invites you to do the same, not because it will be easy or pleasant, but because it's the only way to live that's truly worth it. It's the only way to love that truly transforms you into something greater than it was before. And now, having descended these 3 layers, having looked at the malheur of losing someone, having faced the truth about who the departed person really was and who you really are without them, having practiced decreation until there was only emptiness where there was once ego and need. Now we can finally explore what Simone Weil discovered at the bottom of that emptiness, what she saw when she completely stopped running away from the pain and simply inhabited the absence like someone who inhabits a dark room until your eyes get used to it and you start to see ways that you don't. She saw it before because there is something there, deep within the deepest pain, something that can only be seen when you stop trying to escape, when you stop trying to fix, when you simply are present with what hurts. And what Weil saw was not cheap consolation. It was not the promise that everything would be okay eventually. It wasn't the guarantee that you would find someone better or that time would heal all wounds. What she saw was something much more radical and much more true. She saw that the pain of loss, when you truly accept and inhabit it, teaches you something that no other experience could teach. It forces you to confront truths about love and existence that you could spend your whole life avoiding if you had a choice, but you have no choice. The person has left and the pain is here. And now the only question that matters is, will you allow this pain to destroy you, or will you allow it to transform you? And the difference between destruction and transformation is not in the intensity of the pain. It is not in how long the pain lasts. It is solely in how you relate to the pain, if you fight against it as if it were an enemy to be defeated, or if you welcome it as a brutal teacher who came to teach you something that you needed to learn but would never have the courage to learn voluntarily. And the first lesson that the pain of loss comes to teach you, the first brutal truth that it forces you to face, is that true love has never been about possession. It has never been about having someone who is yours. It has never been about security or guarantees or permanence. True love has always been about contemplation, about attention, about the ability to look at another human being and really see them as they are instead of as you need them to be. And when you love someone in that way, when you truly develop the capacity for full attention that Weil described, then you can love them in their presence or absence. You can love them when they are by your side or when they have left for the other side of the world. You can love them when they love you back or when they have chosen someone else. Because love stopped being about you and your needs and became about simply recognizing the inherent value and beauty of their existence, regardless of how that existence relates to yours. And Weil practiced this in her own life in an almost superhuman way. She loved the people around her with full intensity, but she refused to hold on to them. She refused to make them the source of her validation or happiness. She loved them purely, without expectation. And when she had to leave, or when they left, she felt the complete pain of that separation. But she didn't allow the pain to turn into resentment or bitterness. She just kept loving from a distance, in silence, without demanding reciprocity. And you might think that that sounds cold, that sounds like she didn't really care, but it's exactly the opposite. It's because she cared so deeply that she was able to love without holding on. It's because she understood the infinite value of each person that she didn't try to reduce them to tools for her own emotional satisfaction. And that's the lesson her pain is trying to teach you now. You can keep loving the person who left without needing to. If you want her to come back, you can carry her memory without letting the memory paralyze you. You can recognize the profound impact she had on your life without making her the center around which everything else revolves. Because if you make her the center, if you make her absence the most important thing about you, then you stop living your own life and you start living in reaction to the loss. And that is not honoring what you had. That is wasting what you still have, which is your own life, your own capacity to loving and being loved, your own journey that needs to continue regardless of who is or is not by your side. The second lesson that pain came to teach, the second truth that it forces you to face when you stop running from it, is that you were always complete. You never needed another person to complete you. This idea that there is a half that you are missing, that without that specific person, you are only half human being. This idea is not romantic. It is destructive, because it keeps you eternally searching for something outside of yourself that can only be found within. And when that person left, when they took with them everything you thought you needed to be happy or fulfilled or worthy, what she really did was force you to face the truth you've always avoided. You are responsible for your own completeness. You always have been. No one else can do that work for you. And yes, it's much more comfortable to believe that someone else can fill the void inside you. It's much easier to project your unmet needs onto a romantic partner and expect him to solve them. But Weil shows you, through his own life and through the brutal philosophy he developed, that this is the trap. This is the illusion that keeps you trapped in endless cycles of need and disappointment. Because no human being can carry the weight of being responsible for another's happiness. No relationship can survive when one or both partners are using the other as an emotional crutch instead of choosing to be together from a place of completeness. And so loss, however painful it may be, is actually a brutal gift. It's life forcing you to do the inner work you've always avoided, forcing you to face your own voids and wounds and undivided needs, met and finally take responsibility for them instead of waiting for someone else to heal them. And when you do that work, when you actually develop the capacity to be alone without being lonely, to be complete without needing external validation, then, paradoxically, you become able to love in a much deeper and truer way, because now you are not loving out of necessity. You are loving in abundance. You are not looking for someone to fill a hole. You are offering something from a place of fullness. And that kind of love that doesn't need but chooses, love that it does not demand but offers freely. This is the love that Simone Weil said was the only love that truly transforms both people involved. And the third lesson, the deepest and perhaps the most difficult to accept, is that the pain you feel now, the pain of absence, the pain of having loved and lost, that pain is itself a form of love. It is love that continues, even when there is no one else to receive it. It is love that exists simply because it exists, with no object, no return, no purpose other than to be love. And Weil called this impersonal love in its purest sense, love that has completely transcended the ego and its needs, and now exists as a strength in itself, like a quality of your soul that does not depend on external circumstances. And when you reach that point, when you realize that the pain you feel is not evidence that something is wrong, but evidence that you really loved, evidence that you are capable of caring deeply, evidence that you lived fully instead of sheltering behind emotional walls, then the pain changes in quality. It does not necessarily lessen, but turns into something you can carry with dignity, something that connects you with all the other people who have ever loved and lost, something that makes you part of the human community of shared suffering. And there is something deeply comforting in that, not cheap consolation that makes the pain go away, but true consolation that comes from knowing that you are not alone, that what you are feeling is what countless people before you have felt and countless people after you will feel, that the ability to suffer for love is precisely what makes you human, what connects you to something greater than yourself. And Simone Weil, who suffered so much in her short life, who carried so much pain that she thought you couldn't carry it, it tells you through the centuries, you can do this. You can carry this pain. You can transform this loss into something that expands you rather than diminishes you, and not because you are especially strong or especially enlightened, but simply because you are human, and humans have this extraordinary capacity to grieve and keep loving, to be broken and keep opening up, to lose everything and still find reasons to carry on. And that capacity is the most beautiful and most terrible thing about being human. But it is also what makes us capable of living lives that really matter, lives that touch other lives, lives that leave marks on the world even when no one else remembers our names. But this discovery by Simone Weil is not cheap consolation. It is not New Age optimism that promises that if you think positive everything will be fine. It is something much more radical and much more true. Because what she saw at the bottom of this pain reveals something about the nature of human existence that changes everything. And that is what we need to explore now. Because it is one thing to understand intellectually that pain can teach, that loss can transform, that true love can survive absence, and another thing completely different to actually live with all of this on a daily basis. It is to wake up in the morning with the weight of absence still in your chest and choosing to continue anyway, is getting through the day without drowning in the memory, is finding practical ways to live with a wound that may never completely close. And Simone Weil didn't just philosophize about this. She developed concrete practices, specific ways of relating to pain and absence that can make the difference between sinking and sailing. And these practices are not self-help techniques to eliminate pain. They are ways of being that she forged through years of her own suffering. They are tools she used to maintaining sanity and dignity while carrying pain that would have destroyed less determined people. And she offers you these practices not as a guarantee that they will solve everything, but as possibilities, as paths that you can try to see if they help you, knowing that some days they will work and other days you simply won't. And that's okay too, because failing to practice isn't failure. It's just part of being human. The first practice that Weil developed and lived consistently was what she called morning awareness of pain. And that means that when you wake up, before you do anything else, before you pick up your phone or plan your day or start distracting yourself in all the ways you've learned to distract yourself, you take 10 minutes just noticing what hurts, not to fix it, not to understand it, not to make the pain mean something or go away, just to see it clearly, just to recognize that yes, the pain is here today, the absence is still present, and instead of immediately trying to escape it, you simply sit with it. You let the pain be what it is. You name it internally without judgment. You say to yourself, today the lack is here. Today the hole where it used to be is still open. Today is a day where it hurts just to breathe, and so you just breathe anyway. You watch the pain as you would watch clouds passing by, without completely identifying with it, without becoming the pain, just recognizing that the pain is present, that you are present, that both can exist. Simultaneously, and what Weil discovered by doing this every day for years, is that the observed pain slowly begins to lose its power to completely dominate you. Not because the pain necessarily lessens, but because you develop the capacity to be with the pain without being crushed by it. You create a space between you and the pain where you can breathe, where you can exist as something beyond your suffering. And that space, however small it may be at first, is absolutely crucial because it is in that space that you can begin to make choices again. You can begin to live again, even while you are still alive. Carries the pain, even while the wound is still open. The second practice, connected to the first but different in quality, is what Weil called attention to the beautiful in the midst of the ugly. And this means that when the pain is especially unbearable, when you feel like you are going to be swallowed up by absence, you deliberately find something beautiful. It could be the sky, it could be a song, it could be a poem, it could be the way the light comes in through the window. It could be anything that carries beauty. And you give it your full attention for 5 minutes, not as a distraction, not as a way to escape the pain, but as a reminder that reality contains both pain and beauty, both absence and presence, both darkness and light, and you can allow both to exist simultaneously within you without one overriding the other. Because Weil said that beauty is experiential proof that incarnation is possible. Beauty is the sensible evidence that there is something beyond pain. Not in the sense of denying pain, but in the sense of recognizing that pain is not all there is. And when you practice attention to beauty, even while carrying pain, you are training your soul to have greater spaciousness, to be able to hold contradictory experiences, to not need everything to be one thing or another, pain or joy, presence or absence, but to be able to hold both and still continue. And that is not weakness or denial. That is the deepest form of strength. It is choosing to see completely instead of just seeing partially. It is refusing the simplification that pain tries to impose, that tries to make you believe that because something hurts, nothing else matters. Because if that were true, then you would be doomed. But it is not true. Pain matters, but beauty matters too. Absence is real, but the presence of other things is also real. And you can live carrying all these truths simultaneously. That is what it means to be complete human. The third practice is what Weil called letting go of the narrative. And this is perhaps the most difficult practice because it goes against all of our instincts. Because our mind is constantly creating stories about our pain. It is saying, "This will never get better. I will always be like this. I will never love again. No one will ever love me like she loved me. I wasted my time. I did everything wrong. If I had done it differently, she wouldn't have left." And these stories feel true because you are feeling pain. And the mind takes that feeling of pain and turns into a narrative about the future, into a prediction about how things will always be. But Weil shows you that these narratives are not facts. They are just stories that the ego tells about itself to try to make sense of something that may not have sense, to try to have control over something that is out of control. And the practice is simple but brutally difficult. When you catch your mind creating stories about your pain, when you notice that you are predicting the future based on how you feel now, you gently acknowledge, "This is history, not fact." And then you go back to raw sensation without interpretation. You feel what you are feeling without making it mean anything about who you are or how you will always be. You allow the pain to simply be pain, not evidence that you are inadequate or that you are doomed to suffer forever. Just pain, just sensation, just what is here now. And Weil called this decreation in practice. You are undoing the fictions that the ego tells about itself. You are letting go of the need to turn every sensation into a story. And the more you practice this, the more you. If you can distinguish between feeling something and creating a narrative about that feeling, the more freedom you have. Because you realize that most of your suffering doesn't come from the pain itself, but from the stories you tell about the pain. And when you let go of the stories, when you just feel what you're feeling without interpretation, the pain still hurts, but you're no longer stuck in it. You're just going through it, moment by moment, breath by breath. The fourth practice, connected but different, is what Weil called doing without ego. And that means continuing to live your life, continuing to work, creating, loving, doing all the things that need to be done, but without demanding that these activities fill the void, without expecting them to make you feel better, without using productivity or achievements as a way of proving to yourself that you have overcome the loss. You simply do them because it is what there is to do. You work because the work needs to be done. You take care of yourself because your body needs to be taken care of. You interact with other people because life continues to demand interaction. And you do all this without expecting emotional reward, without expecting that doing things will heal the wound or fill the absence. You do it because doing it is better than not doing it, because movement is better than paralysis, because life, even with pain, is better than death in life. And Weil said that decreation in action is exactly that. It is doing without seeking return. It is living without needing life to give you something specific in return. It is simply being present with what is and responding to what life asks of you at the moment by moment, without creating additional drama about it, without turning every action into a test of whether you have overcome it or not. You just do it. And in the simplicity of this doing, without ego, without expectation, without need, something extraordinary can happen. You begin to live again, not because the pain is gone, but because you realize that you can live even with the present pain, that life and pain are not mutually exclusive, that you can carry both simultaneously. The fifth practice is what Weil called consenting to the day, and this means that when you wake up, before you know what the day will be like, before you have any idea whether it will be a good day or a bad day, a day of mild pain or a day of unbearable pain, you make a choice. You consent to whatever comes. You accept in advance that you have no control over how you will feel. You have no control over when the memory of it will hit you. You have no control over the emotional ups and downs that characterize grief. But you have control over your willingness to accept what comes. And Weil insisted that consent is not resignation. Consent is an act of love for reality. It is choosing to embrace what is instead of eternally fighting against what should be. And when you practice consenting to the day, when you say internally, I accept what this day brings, whether it is pain or relief or both or neither, then when the day brings pain, you are not taken by surprise. You do not add layers of resistance on top of the pain that already exists. You have already consented, so you just feel what you are feeling without adding the extra suffering of wishing it were different. And paradoxically, when you stop fighting the pain, when you allow it to simply be, it becomes more bearable. Not because it lessens, but because you are no longer wasting energy trying to avoid it or change it. You are just carrying it, moment to moment, and discovering that you are stronger than you thought, that you can carry more than you thought possible, that the human capacity to endure is extraordinary when you stop adding resistance to what you already are. Difficult. The sixth practice is something that Weil did regularly, and which may seem strange, but which carries profound power. Writing a letter to pain, not as a therapeutic exercise, not as a way of processing emotions, but as an act of recognition. You sit down once a week with pen and paper. You begin the letter with "Dear Loneliness," or "Dear Loss," or "Dear Fear," or whatever name you give to the pain you carry, and then you write to it as you would to a person. You thank it for what it taught you. You recognize the weight it carries. It carries. You ask for the strength to keep going. You are honest about how hard it is, about how many times you want to give up, about how some days you can't see the point in any of it, and you write it all down without editing, without trying to make it sound beautiful or philosophical, just raw truth. And then you burn the paper or put it away somewhere no one else will see, because it's not for sharing, it's not for performance, it's just for you. It's just recognition that the pain is real, that it deserves to be seen and named, that you can relate to it instead of just being crushed by it. And Weil discovered that when you stop treating pain as an enemy to be defeated and start treating it as a difficult but inevitable companion, as something that is here for reasons that you may not fully understand but can learn to live with, then the quality of the relationship changes. You are no longer at war with yourself. You are just living with all the parts of you, including the parts that hurt. The seventh practice, perhaps the most counterintuitive, but also one of the most powerful, is what Weil called being present to another, even in pain. And this means that when you are with another person, in conversation, in interaction, in any form of human contact, you give your full attention to them, not to your pain. You deliberately shift the focus from your internal pain to the other person's experience. You listen to what they are saying without being half present and half lost in your own hurt. You look at them and really see them. And Weil said that Attention to another is the purest form of love, and it is also a form of momentary decreation. Because when you are completely present with another human being, your ego temporarily dissolves. Your needs temporarily take a back seat. You step out of the endless cycle of thoughts about your own pain and enter another person's reality. And what happens in those moments is extraordinary. You discover that you can step out of the pain for short periods, not because the pain has gone away, but because you chose to be somewhere else, to be with someone else. And it shows you that you are not just in your pain, you are also capable of loving, of connecting, of being present, and every time you do that, every time you manage to be truly present with another human being despite your own pain, you are proving to yourself that the pain has not destroyed you completely, that you are still capable of coming out of yourself, that you still have something to give to the world, and that is not small, that is deeply important, because it reminds you that you are still a complete person, capable of loving and contributing, not just a walking wound. And the eighth practice, the closing practice that Weil did every end of the day, is what she called the nightly recognition ritual. And it consists of, before going to sleep, recognizing three things: a truth that the pain revealed today, a moment of grace even if small, and a choice to remain. You don't force positivity. You don't invent good things if the day was entirely horrible. You just honestly acknowledge, today the pain showed me that I still care deeply even when it hurts. Today there was a moment when the sun on my skin reminded me that I'm alive. Today I chose Inuit instead of giving up. And sometimes those things are tiny. Sometimes the only grace is that you survived one more day, and that's okay. That's enough. Because Weil knew that gratitude is not about pretending that everything is okay. Gratitude is a form of mindfulness that recognizes what is really there, including the little things, including the tiny victories, including the simple fact that you are still here, still trying, still willing to look at the pain instead of completely running away from it. And when you practice this nightly recognition, when you are done each day by naming these three things, you are training your mind to see completely, to not just dwell on the pain, but also to recognize everything else that is present. And over time, this changes how you experience the days. Not because the days become less painful, but because you become able to see beyond the pain, to recognize that even on the worst days, there are small graces, there are small victories, there are small reasons to keep going. And now I need to be absolutely honest with you about these practices, because it would be dishonest to leave you with the impression that if you do all this perfectly, then the pain will go away, or the wound will close, or you will completely overcome the loss. These practices are not a magical cure. They are not a guarantee of transformation. They are not steps that inevitably take you from pain to peace, because some days you will manage to do them all, and you will still want to die. Some days you will not be able to do any of them, and you will feel like a failure. Some days you will do half of them, and it will be enough. Some days you will completely forget about these practices because the pain will be so great that you can barely get out of bed. And all of this is fine. All of this is part of the process, because Simone Weil herself could not live perfectly what she taught. She had days of despair. She had moments where the pain was so great that she could not practice anything she knew to be true. She was human, fallible, broken in many ways, and yet she kept trying, kept practicing when she could, kept coming back to the practices after failing. And what did she do? What is asking you is not perfection, but direction. It is not that you never fail, but that you keep coming back, that you are kind to yourself when you fail, that you recognize that the goal is not to eliminate pain, but to learn to live with it with dignity. And some people will achieve this faster than others. Some people will have good days more often. Some people will find grace more easily. And if you are not one of those people, if it is being more difficult for you, if you have been in this pain for months or years and still see no way out, know that this does not mean that what you're doing wrong. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean there's something fundamentally broken in you. It just means that your journey is your journey, that some wounds take longer to heal, that some pains need to be carried for longer before they start to transform. And that's okay. You're not competing with anyone. You don't need to be better in a certain time frame. You just need to keep going, moment by moment, day by day, doing the best you can with what you have at that particular moment. And now, having walked this journey together through pain, through truth, through practices of coexistence, there is only one thing left: to honor what you had the courage to face during these minutes that we spent together, and to recognize that this is not the end but a beginning of a life lived with open eyes, because you have come this far. You have read or heard all these words about pain and loss and love that transforms, and that already says something about you. It says that you are not like most people who run away at the first sign of emotional discomfort. It says that you have the courage to look directly at what hurts instead of numbing yourself in all the ways that our society offers to not feel it. Say that there is something in you that knows, even when everything inside you is screaming otherwise, that the only way out is through, not around, that the only way to truly live with this loss is to look it in the face and learn what it came to teach. And Simone Weil would say that you are among the few who have the courage to practice true attention, who are willing to decree, who have the strength to consent to what is instead of eternally fighting against reality. And that's no small thing. That's extraordinary. Because most people spend their entire lives avoiding exactly what you're choosing to face. And maybe you don't feel brave. Maybe you feel like you're just surviving, just doing what needs to be done because you have no other choice. But Weil would tell you that that's exactly what real courage looks like. It's not dramatic heroism. It's simply continuing when it would be easier to give up. It's simply looking when it would be more comfortable. It is possible to look away. It is simply to feel when it would be safer to anesthetize yourself. And what we discovered together on this journey can be summed up in an image that Simone Weil would like. Love that leaves doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It stops being something you can touch and hold and becomes something you carry inside like a permanent mark on your soul. And that mark hurts. It hurts in ways you didn't imagine it was possible to hurt. But it's exactly this pain that proves that the love was real, that it transcended physical presence, that it became something bigger than two bodies sharing space. Because love true, the love that Weil spent his entire life trying to understand and practice, is not the one that demands constant presence. It is not the one that dies when the person leaves. It is not the one that turns into hate when it is not reciprocated. True love is the one that can consent from a distance, that can love without possessing, that can look at the person you love and sincerely desire their good, even when that good means being far from you. Even when that good hurts in you like nothing else has ever hurt. And when you develop this capacity, when you learn to love in this way, impersonal, pure, with no expectation of return, then the person can leave, but the love remains, transformed, purified of everything that was not love, but just disguised need. And what remains is something so rare and precious that most people never experience it because it requires something that most are not willing to give. It requires that you let go, that you decree, that you accept that you cannot control, you cannot possess, you cannot force anyone to stay. You can just love while they are here and keep loving when they are gone, and that love without object. This love that exists simply because it exists, regardless of circumstances, regardless of reciprocity. This is the love that truly transforms you, that makes you something greater than you were before. Not because it fills a void, but because it teaches you that there was never a void to fill. Just space to be inhabited with total presence, with true attention, with a willingness to feel everything completely instead of living in half to avoid pain. And now the choice is yours. You can go back to trying to escape the pain. You can try to anesthetize yourself in every way you know. You can continue creating narratives about how unfair life is and how you were betrayed and how you will never be able to love again. And no one would judge you for that because pain is hard and running away is natural and we all do it sometimes. Or you can choose the path that Simone Weil offers you, which is not an easy or comfortable path, but it is a true path. It is choosing to look directly at the pain instead of looking away. It is choosing decreeing instead of building more walls of protection. Is choosing to consent to what is instead of fighting eternally against reality. And Weil doesn't promise that it will be easy. She doesn't promise that the pain will go away quickly. She doesn't promise that you will find clear answers or that everything will make sense eventually. What she promises is that if you have the courage to go through instead of around, to look instead of running away, to feel completely instead of numb, then something can change inside you. Not the external situation necessarily. Not the person will. Coming back, not the past, will be different. But you can transform yourself into someone capable of carrying the truth of loss without being destroyed by it, capable of loving without needing to possess, capable of living fully even with an open wound. And even if you choose to look the other way today, even if you are not yet ready to face it all, the path will be here when you are, and you will never be completely alone on this journey, because Simone Weil walked it before you, and countless others who have loved and lost have walked it before you, and others will walk it after. Of you, and we are all part of that invisible community of people who have chosen to feel fully rather than live half-heartedly. And there is dignity in that. There is beauty in that. There is something deeply human in accepting that loving inevitably means risking loss, but choosing to love anyway. And if you felt that something changed within you during these minutes we spent together, if some truth here resonated with a deep part of your soul that you barely knew existed, then leave a like on this video, because it shows me that these words are reaching those who really need them, those who have the courage to look at what hurts instead of continuing to run away, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey of looking directly at the truth even when it hurts. Because there are others like you who are walking this same path. Others who have also loved and lost. Others who are also learning to live with an open wound, and you don't have to walk alone. We can walk together, each one carrying their own pain, but united in the recognition that we are pain is what makes us human. It's what connects us to each other. It's the price we pay for having had the courage to truly love. And that price is high, but it's worth it. Because life without that kind of deep love that hurts when it's lost isn't really life. It's just a safe but empty existence, and you didn't choose safety. You chose to live. And living means feeling everything: pain and joy, loss and gain, absence and presence, and you're doing it, you're living fully, even when it hurts beyond what you can. I thought it was possible, and that is courage, that is strength, that is dignity. And Simone Weil would be proud. Simone Weil lived only 34 years, but in that short time she looked deeper into human pain than most dare in a lifetime. She found no cure because she knew that some pains have no cure. She found no escape because she knew that escape is illusion. But she found dignity in the wound. She found meaning in suffering. She found beauty even in the deepest pain. Not because she was a masochist or because she romanticized suffering, but because she had the courage to see completely, to not look away from even the ugliest parts of human existence. And what? What she discovered is that when you completely stop running away, when you look directly at what hurts without trying to change it or escape it, you discover that you can carry more than you thought possible, that your ability to bear is extraordinary, that you are stronger than all the thoughts that tell you that you won't make it. And perhaps that is what we are all really looking for. Not the absence of pain, not the guarantee that we will never suffer again, but the ability to bear pain with truth, with attention, with impersonal love that extends to pain itself, which sees everything completely, including the parts that we wish didn't exist. And when you develop this capacity, you are no longer at the mercy of circumstances. You no longer need everything to be perfect to be able to live. You can live with an open wound. You can love with a broken heart. You can continue with part of you always missing, and that is not a tragedy. That is simply being human. It is accepting that humans are not perfect and complete beings, but broken beings that continue anyway, that love despite everything, that find meaning even when there are no answers, who choose to continue even when it would be easier to give up. And you are not alone on this journey. You never have been. And the pain you carry, however heavy it may be, is molding you into something that you cannot yet see, but one day will recognize. It is transforming you into someone capable of loving more deeply. Because you have learned that true love does not require permanence. It is teaching you that you are complete, even in incompleteness. It is showing you that you can continue even when part of you has died with the person who left, and keep looking, keep feeling, keep going, living with open eyes and a broken but still beating heart. Because that's exactly what Simone Weil would do. That's exactly what she's asking of you across the centuries. Not that you overcome it or forget it or stop feeling it, but that you keep feeling it fully while you live fully, that you carry the wound with dignity, that you turn the pain into something that expands you rather than diminishes you. And you can do that. You're doing that. Every moment you choose to keep going, you are doing that. And that's enough. You are enough. Even broken, even injured, even carrying pain that seems like it will never end, you are enough.